Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, government has plans, but nothing changes. That's according to Business Leadership South Africa. The organisation says it's been striving for the best constructive implementation of reforms that have been adopted as government policy, yet failed to materialise. It says little progress has been made to end rolling blackouts and improve transport and logistics systems. I'm joined now by Busisiwe Mavuso. She's the Business Leadership South Africa CEO. She joins us now virtually. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on eNCA. Ms. Mavuso, always good to have you with us. Now, of course, every year business has a wish list, and I assume that the end to power cuts tops that wish list.
Definitely does. You know, it's the end to power cuts, but the broader network industries issue. And when I'm talking about the network industries, I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about ports, I'm talking about logistics, I'm talking about water, I'm talking about telecoms. And maybe we can put telecoms aside for now, because at least it is functional. We still haven't auctioned the spectrum, but at least this is operating as it fairly should. But when you look at the ports and you look at the rail and you look at the water and you look at the energy, you know, these are all areas that continue to be dysfunctional, you know, and we worry about it because we continue to say as a country that the only way that we'll be able to get ourselves out of this economic rut is through investment. But what investment is going to come into a country where you sit with 10 hours of load shedding a day? What investment is going to come into a country where you can't transport your goods, you know, from the port, you know, to the actual destination? You know, at the moment, a lot of companies that deal in imports and exports actually are bypassing the Durban ports and are going to the Maputo ports. Can you imagine the added cost of doing business when you're operating in South Africa, when you actually have to take your goods to Maputo and spend all of that money and the road to actually bring it back to South Africa in context of the fuel prices that actually continue to rise? So I think it's really a fundamental problem. It's a fundamental problem because at the moment we are in WEF, you know, and when you look at it, you will see that we are the most represented country or African country in WEF at the moment. Other African countries don't have as big delegations as South Africa has. And what does that mean for us? It means that we have an opportunity to actually elevate our agenda. We have an opportunity to actually talk about why South Africa is open for business. We have an opportunity to actually position South Africa. I was listening to an interview of Minister Korengwane yesterday where he was actually saying, and he was asked about the power cuts, and he was actually saying in the next 12 to 18 months, load shedding will be a thing of the past. He said in the next 5 months...
I have to come in there, CEO, because, I mean, as a person who was there at Eskom just a few months ago before you decided to leave... What do you think? 12 to 18 months? They keep saying that to South Africans, giving us some sort of hope. Well, what do you think? What truth can you tell us as a person who was inside?
Look, I think the tragedy of South Africa is having all these brilliant plans, but we are not implementing them. We know the president last year in July announced the electricity crisis plan, and we know that a NECOM that is led by DG Phindile Baleni in the presidency is actually been put in place to implement, you know, that electricity crisis plan that was actually put in place. It's 7 months later. I don't know, maybe Maseko, because you play in this space and you probably maybe interview all these people all the time, but I don't know if there actually is already update, feedback, communication in terms of where the work of NECOM is. You know, we know that there are projects in the pipeline. You know, we know that we've actually put in place a whole lot of interventions. We said we were going to buy electricity from other countries. We said we were going to actually accelerate the solar, you know, energy solution. We said, we have said a lot of things, but where are we on implementation? 7 months later, what is the update? What has been done? You know, and because that is the only way you can track whether we can end load shedding in the next 12 to 18 months. And it is now underwhelming, Maseko, when South Africa says it's going to do anything, because the world has caught on to the fact that we have brilliant plans, but we are lacking on implementation. And if we don't meet the targets, you know, that finance minister has actually spoken about it. Because remember, he's talking to global investors. He's talking he's talking to the entire world. You know, so if we don't meet those targets, you know, 12 to 18 months to end load shedding and stopping stage 6 within the next 5 months, it seriously erodes confidence, because you put plans in place, you put targets in place, and you actually don't meet them. So I think this is actually a huge problem. So I think all we are saying as business is that there needs to be a renewed, focus, and efforts and renewed commitments on the structural reform agenda, because it is only through the reform agenda that we are in a position to really position South Africa and to change things around.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the sad part about South Africa, isn't it? That we're very good at diagnosing, we have very beautiful papers and policy, but when it comes to actually implementing and accountability, we lack quite a bit as a country. And this is both with government and sometimes even business, which actually enables those in government who choose to choose the bad path. But I have to ask you this question. The president announcing on Sunday through his spokesperson that he has decided that he's not going to attend WEF. And you mentioned that we are the African country with the most representation at WEF. Do you think that did anything? Did that communicate anything to investors? It surely didn't here locally. South Africans have seen the president, decide not to go to international trips many times since 2018, and nothing has changed. But do you think it did anything to the international world and business and investors in the international world? Does he look like someone who's seemingly sorting out the problems?
I think it won't be good optics if your country is burning and South Africa is burning. Being on stage 6, load shedding for what now? I've lost count. I don't know. Is it 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever the case is? But I think we've been on consistent, ongoing load shedding since September as a country. So let's agree that Rome is burning. So it won't be good optics, if as a president, you are not seen to be trying to find solutions of how to end the current crisis. So I think it probably maybe bodes well from an optics perspective, that we are taking this matter so seriously, such that the president really suspended his trip to Davos, which is actually also important, but that is just from an optics perspective, Masiho. You are probably going to have to come out after this and say, now that I've decided to come,
here's what I've done.
And what are you going to do? What is the plan? The very same thing that I'm talking about around NICOM, can we probably maybe right now, as we are in WEF, as our delegation is going to be facing these tough questions of how you are actually going to fix the electricity crisis, isn't this the right time for NICOM to come out and say, this is the plan, even if it's not a perfect plan. It's normally important to just indicate intent, indicate what is in the pipeline. So I think we're also not very good at communicating. So it will really, alter the conversations if this week, while we're having these conversations at WEF, and where spotlight is going to be shown on South Africa, because we have the most delegation there, to really look at, how South Africa is actually going to be fixing this issue. There's going to be a huge focus on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement as well.
Exactly.
Because if you remember, at the last WEF, the forum launched the Forum Friends of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and what they are going to be receiving now is a report which is going to look at how can global business accelerate the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement? So if that is where the world is at,
then we can imagine, and as one of and as one of the strongest economies in Africa, as well as in South Africa, the attention will also obviously be on us and some of the solutions we say we'll find. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Always a pleasure. That was Business Leadership South Africa CEO Busisiwe Mavuso.